He left her to die at sea so he could marry his mistress. But she survived. And when she showed up, his tears tasted sweeter than revenge. This is the story of how she went from abandoned wife to the woman who destroyed his empire. The storm outside mirrored the tempest raging in Evelyn Hart's chest as she stood motionless in the yacht's lavish cabin, her fingers gripping the edge of the polished mahogany table until her knuckles turned white. The air smelled of salt and betrayal, thick enough to choke on. Daniel, her husband of 7 years, stood before her with an expression she had never seen before. Not regret, not sorrow, but something far worse: indifference. His hand rested casually on the shoulder of a stunning woman with sharp cheekbones and a smirk that made Evelyn's stomach twist. "I'm sorry, Evelyn," Daniel said, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "But this is the way it has to be." Evelyn's breath hitched. This was the woman, Ifia. The name had been whispered in hushed office conversations, glimpsed in deleted text messages, but never confirmed, never real. "He'll know. You're leaving me for her?" Evelyn's voice was barely above a whisper, but the words cut through the room like a blade. Daniel didn't flinch. "It's not that simple." But it was. Before she could react, the crew, men she had laughed with, shared meals with, grabbed her arms. No warning. No struggle. Just cold efficiency. She thrashed, her heels scraping against the deck as they dragged her toward the lifeboat. "Daniel," she screamed, her voice raw. He didn't look away as they lowered her into the tiny vessel. No supplies. No radio. Just the cruel irony of a lifeboat that wouldn't save her. The last thing she saw before the storm swallowed her whole was Sophia's victorious smile and Daniel's empty gaze. Then darkness. The lifeboat tossed violently in the waves, each crest threatening to flip her into the abyss. Rain lashed at her skin like needles, the wind howling like a wounded animal. Evelyn clutched the sides, her mind racing. He had planned this. He wanted her gone. Not just divorced, erased. As the yacht's lights faded into the storm, something inside her snapped. Fear gave way to fury. Sorrow hardened into resolve. If she survived this, when she survived this, Daniel Hart would regret the day he left her to die. The ocean spat her out 3 days later. Evelyn awoke to the jagged kiss of rocks against her back, her body screaming in protest as she dragged herself onto the shore. Sand mixed with blood where her skin had torn, her once elegant dress now a tattered shroud. The island stretched before her, a cruel paradise of swaying palms and silent judgment. No people. No signs of life beyond the skittering crabs and distant cries of gulls. Alone. Really alone. The first night was the worst. The island's silence was deafening, pressing against her eardrums like a physical weight. She curled into a ball beneath the skeletal arms of a driftwood tree, shaking, not from cold, but from the crushing realization that no one was coming for her. Daniel had won. Or so he thought. By morning, her tears had dried into something harder. She had 2 choices: lie down and die or fight. Evelyn Hart had never been one to surrender. Food became an obsession. The island offered little mercy. She tried berries, only to spend hours vomiting. She dug for clams, her nails breaking against the rocks. The first fish she speared with a sharpened stick slipped away, leaving her with nothing but frustration. But hunger was a relentless teacher. He learned. By the second week she could weave a basic net from vines. By the third she had built a crude fish trap. Her stomach still ached, but the gnawing void of starvation no longer haunted her every thought. She marked the days with notches on a flat stone near her shelter. Each scratch was a promise. "I'm still here. And I'm coming back." The fever hit without warning. One moment she was gathering coconuts. The next the world tilted, her vision swimming with black spots. She barely made it back to her shelter before collapsing, her skin burning. For 3 days she drifted in and out of consciousness, her throat parched, her body racked with chills. The island didn't care if she lived or died. Nature was indifferent. But Evelyn refused to be. She dragged herself to the freshwater stream inch by agonizing inch. She forced down the bitter medicinal leaves Elias would later teach her could heal. And when the fever broke, she emerged, weaker but wiser. Survival wasn't just about strength. It was about stubbornness. Fire was life. He had read that once in some adventure novel. Now she understood. Fire meant warmth. Safety. A way to cook food, purify water, signal for help. But making it was another battle entirely. Her first attempts were pathetic, rubbing sticks together until her palms blistered, sparks fizzling into nothing. She screamed in frustration, hurling the sticks into the trees. Then she tried again. And again. On the seventh night, as the last light bled from the sky, a tiny ember caught. She cupped it with trembling hands, feeding it dried leaves until flames licked hungrily at the kindling. The fire danced in her eyes, casting long shadows across the sand. For the first time since the yacht, Evelyn smiled. She was learning. And soon she would be ready. The stars were different here, brighter, sharper, as if the sky had been scrubbed clean of civilization's haze. Evelyn lay on her back, tracing constellations she didn't know the names of. Somewhere out there, Daniel was living his new life. Sophia was wearing her jewelry, sleeping in her bed, laughing with her friends. The thought should have shattered her. Instead, it fueled her. She closed her eyes and made a vow to the uncaring stars. When I return, you won't see me coming. And for the first time she believed it. The island had a way of playing tricks on the mind. At first, Evelyn thought the figure standing at the edge of the treeline was a hallucination. Another cruel mirage conjured by hunger and isolation. The man was tall, his frame lean but strong, skin darkened by decades under the sun. His beard was wild, streaked with gray, and his eyes, sharp, calculating, watched her with an intensity that made her fingers twitch toward the knife at her belt. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice rough like gravel dragged over sand. Evelyn didn't move. She had spent months surviving this place alone, trusting nothing but her own instincts. And now here he was, real or not, standing between her and the freshwater stream she had come to rely on. "Neither are you," she shot back, her voice hoarse from disuse. The man didn't smile. He simply tilted his head, studying her the way a predator might size up prey. Then, without another word, he turned and vanished into the trees. Evelyn waited, heart pounding, before forcing herself to follow. His name was Elias. He had been here for 15 years, shipwrecked, abandoned, left to rot by men he once called brothers. He didn't offer details, and Evelyn didn't ask. Survival had a way of stripping away unnecessary words. At first she kept her distance. She had learned the hard way that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. But hunger and desperation eroded caution, and when Elias left a freshly caught fish at the edge of her camp one evening, she hesitated only a moment before taking it. The next morning she found him skinning a rabbit with a blade made from sharpened bone. "You're wasting energy," he said without looking up. "Chasing fish like that. There's a better way." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Teach me." Elias finally met her gaze. "Why should I?" "Because if you don't, I'll keep scaring off your game." A flicker of something, amusement, respect, passed over his face. Then he tossed her the knife. "Pay attention." Elias was relentless. He taught her how to set snares that didn't snap shut too soon. How to read the tide so she could harvest clams without drowning. How to distinguish between the berries that would nourish her and the ones that would kill her in agony. But his most important lesson had nothing to do with survival. "Anger will keep you alive," he said one night as they sat by the fire, the flames casting shadows across his weathered face. "But it won't make you strong." Evelyn clenched her jaw. "You don't know what he did to me." "I know enough." Elias poked at the embers with a stick. "You think about him every night. I see it in your face. That's a weakness." She wanted to argue, to scream. But the truth of his words settled like a stone in her gut. Daniel still had power over her even here. And that was unacceptable. The storm came without warning. One moment the sky was clear. The next, wind howled through the trees like a living thing, rain slicing sideways in sheets. Evelyn's shelter, a fragile thing of palm fronds and driftwood, collapsed within seconds. She ran blind until she slammed into something solid. Elias. He dragged her into a cave she hadn't known existed, its walls smooth from years of use. A fire already burned in the center, its light revealing shelves carved into the rock, tools, dried meat, even books wrapped in oiled leather. Evelyn stared. "You've been here the whole time." Elias didn't answer. He simply handed her a blanket and turned away. That night, as the storm raged outside, Evelyn made a decision. She would learn everything he had to teach. And then she would leave. Months passed. Evelyn grew stronger, sharper. She could track a deer by the slightest broken twig, start a fire in under a minute, navigate the island's treacherous cliffs without hesitation. But Elias was holding something back. She confronted him at dawn, finding him on the beach as he watched the horizon. "You know a way off this island," she said. He didn't deny it. "Men come here sometimes," he admitted. "Fishermen. Smugglers. They land on the far side where the currents are calmer." Evelyn's pulse spiked. "When?" "Next full moon." She exhaled slowly. "That was 2 weeks away. Why tell me now?" Elias finally looked at her. "Because you're ready." And for the first time Evelyn believed him. The boat arrived under cover of darkness. Evelyn crouched in the trees, watching as 3 men unloaded crates onto the sand. Smugglers, just as Elias had said. This was her chance. She could slip aboard, hide, let them carry her back to civilization. Back to Daniel. But Elias stood beside her, silent. "You're not coming," she realized. He shook his head. "My life is here now." Evelyn wanted to argue, to drag him with her. But she understood. Some chains couldn't be broken. He turned to go, then stopped. "Thank you," she whispered. Elias didn't reply. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezed once and melted back into the shadows. The boat smelled of salt and diesel. Evelyn hid among the crates, her heart pounding as the engine roared to life. As the island shrank behind her, she didn't look back. He had a promise to keep. The city smelled like smoke and money. Evelyn stood at the docks, her borrowed clothes hanging loose on her frame, her skin still carrying the phantom grit of sand and salt. Around her, the world moved in a blur of honking cabs and chattering tourists. People who had never known hunger, never felt the raw terror of being truly alone. She had spent 3 days hiding on that smuggler's boat, curled between crates of contraband, listening to the crew laugh about deals and women and things she no longer cared about. When they docked in a nameless port, she slipped away like a shadow, stealing a hoodie from a clothesline and vanishing into the streets. Now here she was. Back in the city Daniel had built his empire in. Back where it had all begun. And back where it would end. The internet cafe was dim, the air thick with the scent of stale coffee and sweat. Evelyn slid into a corner booth, her fingers trembling as she typed Daniel's name into the search bar. The screen flooded with results. Hart Industries announces expansion. Daniel Hart and Sophia Loren celebrate 1-year wedding anniversary. Philanthropist Daniel Hart donates $2 million to Ocean Conservation Fund. Her stomach twisted. Ocean conservation. The irony was almost funny. She clicked on an image. Daniel, smiling in a tailored suit, his arm around Sophia's waist. They looked happy. Untouchable. Evelyn's reflection glowed faintly in the monitor, her sun-darkened skin and hollow cheeks a stark contrast to the polished world on the screen. She closed the tab. She had seen enough. Survival had taught her patience. She couldn't just storm into Daniel's life screaming accusations. The world thought she was dead. The world preferred her dead. So she would play the long game. A fake name. A new identity. A job where she could watch, learn, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Hart Industries was hiring. The interview was a joke. Evelyn, now Lena Voss, according to the forged papers she'd paid for with stolen cash, sat across from a bored HR rep who barely glanced at her resume. "Your background is unconventional," the woman said, flipping a page. Evelyn smiled. "I like to think of it as adaptable." 2 days later she was hired as a junior analyst in the finance department. Low level. Invisible. Perfect. She saw him on her 3rd day. Daniel strode through the office like a king, his entourage scrambling to keep up. He was taller than she remembered, his hair lighter, his laugh louder. But his eyes were the same, cold even when he smiled. Evelyn ducked behind her monitor, her pulse roaring in her ears. Breathe. This wasn't the time. Not yet. Sophia came to the office every Friday. She would sweep in, all designer perfume and practiced grace, her laughter like wind chimes in a hurricane. The employees adored her. The men stared. The women envied. Evelyn watched. And she learned. Sophia was careless. She left her phone unlocked on desks. She took personal calls in empty conference rooms. She flirted with Daniel's youngest VP, her fingers lingering just a second too long on his arm. Evelyn filed it all away. Every flaw was a weapon waiting to be used. The charity gala was the event of the season. Daniel and Sophia would be there, of course, front and center, smiling for the cameras. Evelyn bought a dress with cash, black and sleek, the kind of thing Sophia would wear. She styled her hair differently, darkened her eyebrows, wore contacts that turned her eyes from green to gray. She looked like a stranger. Good. The ballroom glittered, all crystal and champagne and false smiles. Evelyn moved through the crowd like a ghost, her gaze locked on Daniel. He stood near the stage, Sophia on his arm, accepting applause for some meaningless donation. Evelyn took a flute of champagne from a passing waiter and walked toward them. Pose. Then. Excuse me. Daniel turned, his polite smile already in place. Evelyn raised her glass. Congratulations on the fundraiser. It's inspiring to see such generosity. His smile faltered. For a heartbeat, his eyes searched hers, confusion flickering into something darker. Then Sophia laughed, breaking the spell. Thank you. Are you with the press? Evelyn smiled. Something like that. She walked away before Daniel could speak again. But she felt his gaze burning into her back long after she disappeared into the crowd. The email came the next morning. Ms. Voss. Mr. Hart requests a meeting with you today at 3 p.m. Please confirm. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. Got you. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor was the longest 30 seconds of Evelyn's life. She watched the numbers climb on the brass panel, her reflection staring back at her from the polished doors. Lena Voss, junior analyst, in a tailored blazer and hair swept into a sleek knot. Nothing like the sun-bleached wildness of the woman Daniel had abandoned. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area of cold marble and glass, where a sharp-eyed assistant barely glanced up from her screen. Ms. Voss? Mr. Hart will see you now. Evelyn's heels clicked across the floor like measured gunshots. Daniel's office was exactly as she remembered, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same ridiculous $200,000 abstract painting he'd bought to impress clients, the faint scent of his cologne lingering like a ghost. He stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the skyline. You wanted to see me, Mr. Hart? She kept her voice carefully neutral. When he turned, his face was unreadable. Do I know you from somewhere, Ms. Voss? The question hung between them, loaded. Evelyn tilted her head. I don't believe so. Unless you frequent the third-floor break room. A beat of silence. Then Daniel gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. She did, crossing her legs slowly, watching his gaze flicker to the scar on her calf. A memento from the island's coral reefs. You worked in Singapore, he said abruptly, flipping open her personnel file. Yet you have no accent. Adopted young, she lied smoothly. His fingers tapped the desk. Your references are sparse. Evelyn smiled. I prefer to let my work speak for itself. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Then Daniel leaned forward, his voice dropping. Who sent you? Evelyn blinked. Excuse me. Was it Carrington? The board. His knuckles whitened around a pen. What do you really want? For a heartbeat she considered telling him, watching his perfect composure shatter. Instead she reached into her bag and slid a folder across the desk. The analysis you requested on the Brisbane acquisition. I noticed some irregularities in the financials. Page 12 is particularly interesting. Daniel's gaze dropped to the papers, his brow furrowing. Evelyn stood. Unless there's something else, sir? He didn't look up. That's all. She was at the door when he spoke again. Voss. Evelyn turned. Daniel's expression had shifted, something calculating in his eyes. You'll report directly to me moving forward. A chill ran down her spine. Game on. The promotion gave her access. Daniel's private calendar. His encrypted emails. The biometric secured files only 5 people in the company could access. Evelyn worked late, her fingers flying across keyboards, planting tiny data tracers in systems, memorizing security rotations. But the real prize came on a rainy Tuesday. Sophia stormed into Daniel's office during their weekly meeting, her designer heels leaving wet marks on the carpet. We need to talk. Alone. Daniel barely glanced up. Miss Voss stays. Sophia's glare could have melted steel. This is about the account in Grand Cayman. Evelyn kept her face blank, but her pulse roared. Offshore accounts. Daniel's jaw tightened. Sit down, Sophia. What followed was a masterclass in marital discord, veiled threats, hissed accusations, The kind of fight that only happens when both parties have dirt on each other. Evelyn memorized every word. Mira Patel in IT noticed her first. "You're accessing some unusual servers," Mira said casually one afternoon, leaning over Evelyn's cubicle. Evelyn's fingers froze on the keyboard. Mira smiled, lowering her voice. "Relax. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to dig into Hart's offshore shell companies." Evelyn studied the younger woman, the faded tattoo peeking from her collar, the defiance in her eyes. "Why? My sister worked here." Until she questioned why safety funds disappeared from the factory in Indonesia. Myra's smile turned razor-sharp. She fell down some stairs. Conveniently, Evelyn slid a flash drive across the desk. "I need access to the executive elevator logs." Mira pocketed it. "You'll have them tomorrow." The numbers didn't lie. Late-night meetings with the CFO. Unexplained wire transfers. A pattern of consulting fees paid to a dummy corporation that traced back to... Evelyn's breath caught. The yacht. The same vessel Daniel had left her to die on was registered to an offshore holding company. A company that had received $3 million from Hart Industries 6 weeks after her disappearance. Insurance fraud. She nearly laughed. All this time she thought he'd wanted her dead for love. But it was always about money. The annual shareholders' meeting was in 3 days. Evelyn prepared meticulously. Duplicate files. Hidden recorders. A burner phone taped beneath a bathroom sink. Mira hacked the projector system. "They'll see everything." Evelyn nodded, sliding a final document into the board packets. A photograph of the yacht's logbook, showing its location the night Daniel claimed she'd fallen overboard in a storm. The first light of dawn crept through the blinds as Evelyn stood before her closet, fingers brushing against the navy Stella McCartney suit she'd purchased for this exact moment. The fabric was cool to the touch, expensive, understated, powerful. She dressed methodically. Silk blouse, tailored trousers, the Louboutin pumps Daniel had once complimented on another woman. Every piece was armor. On her nightstand, the flash drive containing 2 years of evidence glinted in the morning light. Next to it sat a printed photograph. Her and Daniel on their 5th anniversary, his arms slung carelessly around her shoulders, her smile wide and trusting. He tucked it into her pocket. A reminder of what she'd lost and what she was about to reclaim. Her phone buzzed. "Mira, projectors rigged. Javier's deposition is queued. FBI is on standby. You good?" Evelyn typed one word. "Ready." The elevator doors opened to chaos. Assistants scrambled with last-minute reports, security guards murmured into headsets, and the sharp click of Sophia's heels echoed across the marble as she stormed toward Evelyn. "Lena." Sophia's voice was saccharine, her French manicure digging into Evelyn's arm. "You look different today." Evelyn smiled, noting the slight tremor in Sophia's grip. "Big presentation. I wanted to dress the part." Sophia's gaze flickered to the conference room, where Daniel held court, laughing too loudly at some joke the CFO had made. "Whatever you think you're doing." "Sophia." Evelyn leaned in, close enough to smell the Chanel No. 5 Daniel had once bought for her. "Run." The doors slid shut between them. The room smelled of expensive coffee and nervous sweat. Evelyn took her seat at the far end of the table, watching as Daniel adjusted his tie in the reflection of the polished mahogany. "Ms. Voss." His voice carried across the room. "I trust you have the Brisbane numbers?" She slid a folder toward him. "And then some." The CFO, Mark Reynolds, chuckled into his whiskey. "Ambitious. I like it." Evelyn said nothing, her fingers resting lightly on the flash drive in her pocket. Daniel stood flashing his veneers. "Another record year thanks to our expansion in Asia." Evelyn cleared her throat. "And the Cayman Islands?" Silence. Daniel's smile didn't waver, but his knuckles whitened around his pen. "I'm sorry." She stood, nodding to the AV technician. "Play the files, please." The screen flickered to life. First slide. The yacht's logbook time-stamped the night of her disappearance. Weather conditions: clear. Winds: 5 knots. No advisories. Evelyn tapped her tablet, pulling up Daniel's tearful interview with CNN. Freak storm came out of nowhere. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Second slide. Bank records. A $3 million transfer from Hart Industries to Cayman Islands Maritime LLC. 6 weeks after my disappearance, Evelyn said. Funny timing. Daniel shot to his feet. This is absurd. Security. Third slide. The life insurance policy. Beneficiary, Sophia Loran. Old man Peterson, the longest-serving board member, removed his glasses. Daniel. Explain. Fourth slide. Javier Ruiz's deposition, his face filling the screen. Mr. Hart gave the order. Make sure she doesn't come back. The room erupted. Daniel lunged across the table, but 2 board members intercepted him. Outside, federal agents materialized in the hallway, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Sophia screamed something unintelligible, her perfect hair finally mussed. Evelyn remained still, watching as reality crashed over Daniel in waves. First denial, then rage, then something almost like fear. Enjoy prison, she murmured, straightening her blazer. I hear the view is just like the island. The glass doors hissed shut behind her. Reporters swarmed the sidewalk, their cameras flashing like strobe lights. Mira fell into step beside her, handing over a burner phone. Sophia's at the airport. Evelyn dropped it into a storm drain. Let her go. Above them, a news chopper circled, broadcasting live footage of Daniel being led away in handcuffs. His mugshot flashed across every screen in the financial district. His perfect hair finally in disarray. Somewhere beyond the skyline, waves crashed against an unnamed island. Somewhere, a woman who no longer existed could finally rest. The penthouse was too quiet. Evelyn stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching dawn bleed across the Manhattan skyline, her reflection ghostly against the glass. 2 weeks had passed since the boardroom collapse, since Daniel's perp walk had splashed across every financial news outlet, since Sophia had been detained at Charles de Gaulle Airport trying to board a flight to Moscow with a suitcase full of cash and someone else's passport. The scotch in her hand, 25-year Macallan, Daniel's favorite, remained untouched. The ice melted into watery amber. Behind her, the muted television replayed the same footage on loop. Federal agents carrying boxes from Hart Industries, the stock price plummeting in real time, pundits debating whether this was the biggest corporate fraud case of the decade. Mira had left an hour ago after delivering the final blow. Javier's testimony had been unsealed, and with it the recording of Daniel calmly instructing the crew to leave no trace of his wife's disappearance. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the crystal tumbler. She'd imagined this moment for 2 years on that godforsaken island, rehearsed every possible ending. Now that it was here, the hollowness in her chest surprised her. The photograph she kept in her pocket, that last vacation selfie with Daniel in St. Barth's, his arms slung carelessly around her shoulders, her face alight with trust, had become brittle at the edges from how often she'd handled it. She didn't take it out now. Instead, she crossed to the sleek modern desk where Mira had left a manila envelope containing the final pieces. The deed to the island where Elias still lived, purchased anonymously through 3 shell companies, a first-class ticket to anywhere in the world, and a single key to a safety deposit box containing what remained of the Hart fortune after the SEC fines. The morning light caught on the embossed business card tucked beside them. Evelyn Shaw, Principal, Blackstone Advisory Group. A new name. A new life. The weight of it should have felt like victory. Rain began to patter against the windows as her phone buzzed for the 100th time that morning. Unknown number. She answered on the 4th ring. Evelyn. Daniel's voice was raspy from disuse, the jailhouse phone line crackling between them. They gave me one call. She didn't respond. The silence stretched, filled only with the staticky sound of his breathing. I could fight this, he said finally, that old arrogance creeping back in. With the right lawyer. You signed the insurance documents yourself, Daniel. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. Dated 2 weeks before the accident. The jury will love that. A beat. Then so quiet she almost missed it. What do you want? The question hung between them, loaded with all the things they'd never said. Evelyn turned the key from the safety deposit box over in her fingers, watching the light glint off its brass edges. Outside, the storm intensified, rain lashing the windows in sheets. Somewhere beyond the skyline, waves would be crashing against that unnamed island where she'd learned to start fires with sticks and stitch wounds with fishing line. Where Elias was probably gutting his morning catch right now, untroubled by extradition laws or stock prices. Nothing from you, she said at last and hung up. The tumbler shattered beautifully against the marble fireplace, scotch spreading like blood across the stone. Evelyn left it there as she shouldered her bag, just a single leather duffel packed light, and took one last look around the penthouse. No note. No grand gesture. Just the photograph left face down on the desk, its edges finally beginning to fray. The elevator doors slid shut behind her with a whisper. Downstairs a car waited to take her to the airport. Beyond that, an island where the only sounds were the wind through the palms and the distant cry of gulls. Where no one would think to look for the woman who'd destroyed Daniel Hart. Somewhere over the Atlantic, as the plane climbed through the storm clouds into clear blue sky, Evelyn finally slept. Epilogue. 6 months later. The postcard arrived at Myra's new office in Geneva. No return address, just a stamp from the Seychelles. On the front, a sun-bleached dock stretching into turquoise water. On the back, 3 words in familiar handwriting. Tell Javier thanks. Myra smiled and tucked it into her desk drawer beside the other memento, a faded newspaper clipping of Daniel Hart being sentenced to 25 years in a federal prison. Justice, not revenge. Out the window, snow began to fall on the Alps. Somewhere far to the south, the trade winds carried the scent of salt and possibility. The end.